Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. I'm Elan Journo.
I'm Keith Lockitch.
We're here to talk about the Junior Fellows Program and the Objectivist Academic Center here at the Ayn Rand Institute. I'm glad so many of you were able to join us and send in questions. We're going to turn to your questions that have been submitted in a moment or two. And then once we get through those questions, if there's time, we'll toggle back and have a look to see if there are any questions that have arisen in the chat during the live broadcast. So to begin, I thought it would be useful to start with some context. So just a broad question to you, Keith, so you can set up the discussion for us. What is the Objectivist Academic Center?
Yeah, okay, so the Objectivist Academic Center is the broad name that covers all the advanced training programs that we do at the Ayn Rand Institute. So part of our mission is to help people who are interested in becoming intellectuals, to help train them for careers, whether in academia or in policy work, and we have a number of programs that are aimed at doing that. So in the Objectivist Academic Center is the broad category. Within that we have a program that new people would apply to would be our core course. And that's a one-year course that covers different aspects of the kinds of activities that are involved in having an intellectual career. So the main things that we cover, the idea is if you want to become a professor in academia, you want to go into public policy, there are certain activities that go along with that career: writing, speaking, engaging in philosophical thinking, applying ideas to the subjects that you're working on, studying and researching and writing about. And so in the core course, we focus on those various skills. So there's a heavy emphasis on communication skills. There's a strong component on writing for a general audience and communicating to a general audience. And then there's a component that looks at philosophical thinking. So those are the kind of things that go into that one-year core course. And then we also have the Junior Fellows Program, which you can say
Sure.
a little about.
So one important feature of the OAC, and this is a point of contrast with the Junior Fellows Program, the OAC for most of the students is a distance learning program. You take part online through a video chat system, very much like this one, conference. And for students who are close enough to our Irvine office, they're welcome to come to class. But that's the vast minority of students. The Junior Fellows Program is an educational offshoot of our OAC agenda, and basically it's on-site training and work experience. So people come on to our staff for up to a year, and during that time they write and they research and they do the kind of work that is involved in an intellectual career oriented towards policy issues. And during that time, in addition to the work that they do, on which they get feedback and additional training, we have a series of workshops that they take part in the kinds of skills that are necessary for being an effective communicator in writing and in speaking. So, for example, we, in addition to analyzing articles and thinking about how to write and how to answer arguments, we also give media training and public speaking. So it's similar to the kinds of skills that the OAC offers in the training that people take remotely and through the web, but it's individualized here on site, day to day. So it's like being immersed in a training program for a protracted period of time, and you work closely with the staff here at the Institute who generate content and edit and speak. So you're able to learn from people who have experience and who are here to help guide you in your development. So that's the OAC in a nutshell. It's a residential on-site program up to a year. It has components that are basically work, intellectual work, and training in the skills you need to become more effective in that kind of career.
And I guess another point of contrast would be that, so the core course, the OAC core course, which I described before, is a course. You've got a dozen, maybe 24 students, and it's more of like a classroom setting where you're listening to lectures online, handing in homework, getting feedback on that. Whereas the Junior Fellows Program is a fellowship at the Institute. There might only be 1-2 people in the program per year.
Right. So ideally, we bring in 2 to 4. The last couple of iterations we've had 2, and this current year we had 1. And the reason for that is primarily it's a very selective program. So consider that we invest a lot of time in the people who come in for the junior fellowship program. We can only do that with a small number of people. And the results are supposed, on the theory, we invest more in a number of people because we think they have a lot of potential. And the goal is that that can accelerate their development and open up opportunities for them in their careers. Right, so that's sort of an overview. You can look at our website if you haven't already to acquaint yourself with what the programs are about. The questions we're going to take on now will, I think, fill in some details and give a wider context in other cases. So I wanted to start with the one on Ayn Rand in academia broadly and what prospects are.
Yeah, so these are questions that people submitted in advance, so written questions that we have here. The essence of the question is, you know, most professors tend to be leftists. Many philosophy professors tend to dislike Ayn Rand, and the questioner is asking, what are the prospects for change? Is it what kind of hope is there to change the atmosphere of academia? Do you believe becoming a professor and teaching at a college is an effective path toward changing people's minds or changing society? Well, certainly, you know, becoming a professor is an essential. I mean, getting Ayn Rand's ideas into academia, having them discussed in an academic setting, is critical. In terms of changing people's minds, you know, the idea, if you're a professor who has students coming through every year, you're directly reaching each new generation of students. And if you think of it this way, if all they're exposed to are the leftist professors who hate Ayn Rand, they're not going to get an accurate presentation of her ideas, or, you know, they're not going to be favorably disposed to thinking about them in an objective, serious way. Whereas if you're in there and you're giving an accurate presentation of them, that's more likely to happen. But I do want to say, so that one premise of the question is that there's an implication here that the reason one should become a professor, or part of the reason, should be, you know, to go in there with the goal of changing society. Now, there is an element to that, but I would say if you're considering a career as a professor, you're considering a career as a college teacher, the most important consideration that you should have for yourself is that career what you are most passionate about? You know, do you burn with a passion to get up every day and engage in scholarship in the subject of, well, the question is asking about philosophy, but any academic subject, whether it's history or economics, you know, is that what you're passionate about? And you have to be passionate about the subject itself, not just, you know, if you're interested in philosophy, I think it's a mistake if your sole interest in it is that you're interested in Ayn Rand's philosophy, but you don't care what Hume had to say, or Descartes, or Plato. If that's totally uninteresting to you, and all you care about is what Ayn Rand had to say, then I would question whether you're really interested in being a philosophy professor. A philosophy professor is someone who's interested in the subject of philosophy, and you know, you've got to want to get up and be as equally interested in teaching your students about what Plato had to say as, you know, introducing Ayn Rand's ideas into the curriculum. And, you know, what goes along with being an academic is, you know, the whole academic debate. You'll be meeting with colleagues every day who, you know, don't necessarily know that much about Ayn Rand's ideas. And, you know, the way to effectively change people's minds is if you're a colleague in a philosophy department who they recognize as somebody who's a top-notch thinker, who's interested in the subject of philosophy, who knows how to think about it in a deep way, and you happen to be interested in Ayn Rand, well, that's interesting to them. That's going to change their perception of Ayn Rand and of the people who are interested in her. So it can be, so becoming a professor can be a very effective way of bringing about cultural change. But for you as an individual, the critical question is this your passion for what you want in your career? Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would add one thing, which is the core course in the OAC that Keith mentioned earlier. One of the goals in that program is to give the students a taste of what it looks like to engage with the field of philosophy and other applications of it, so that they get an idea, well, this is what it looks like to look at the questions that philosophy asks and that Ayn Rand has offered answers for, and where do her views, how to locate her views, how to situate them. And that's an important step in understanding is what I'm really passionate about is Ayn Rand's views and explaining those and studying those. I'm very interested in the basic questions and how she answers them. And one answer is I'm interested in philosophy, the field. And one answer is I'm interested in Ayn Rand's philosophy. And those are important to distinguish. They obviously go together for many people. But one of the values of the core program is that it can help you figure that out in your thinking on the issue.
Just one final point here. I mean, I think the perception that there's hostility to Ayn Rand in academia and that professors tend to a certain persuasion is true, but it's also something that's changing. Ayn Rand is becoming the subject of more serious scholarly interest, and there are a number of philosophy professors who do engage in scholarship in Ayn Rand's ideas. The American Philosophical Association has an Ayn Rand Society, for instance, and every year they have a meeting where their professors are talking about Ayn Rand's ideas. So I think generally the perception is true, but I also think you ask, is it possible to change it? I think there are ways in which it already is changing for the better. So
yeah.
Okay.
Good point.
Yeah, why don't we move on?
So moving to a question about the Junior Fellows Program. So this question has two parts. One is, just to condense the question, the person has most of the requirements listed on our website, but is missing one, namely they haven't had their writing published. So we encourage people to submit writing samples, ideally that have been published. So the specific answer to this question is, yes, you should apply even if you haven't had your articles published, because what we're interested in seeing is the quality of the writing and the thinking that those articles represent. Are there other requirements that one could skip? I don't think so. It's really, the goal of the program is to attract people who are passionate about Ayn Rand's ideas and bring those ideas to the debates around policy issues. So one has to have enough knowledge of Ayn Rand to know what that looks like, some of the content of what she has to say, some of what makes her distinctive, and that one has the interest in the kind of work required to do that, which is writing and speaking and research. So the kind of things we ask for in the application packet are intended to demonstrate that. So that's sort of the way to look at those requirements rather than as a strict checklist, oh, my article hasn't been published, I can't apply. Still apply if you meet all the other considerations. So let's turn to the second part of the question.
Oh, second part.
Yeah, so the second part of the question is really important because the question then is the Junior Fellows Program free once enrolled, or is there tuition? So it's important to clarify the Junior Fellow Program is in effect a job for up to a year. You actually earn a salary, and it's a competitive one in the field. You have the benefits that ARI staff qualify for. So it's a real job, and they're real job requirements. It's not primarily a studying program in the sense that you sit and take classes all day. You do study, but you come here to work and gain experience in the kind of activities needed for this kind of career. So we pay the people to come here and take part in the fellowship. And the OAC as well. I don't know what the status is in the OAC.
Yeah, so I mean, it might be that. So the question might be conflating the Junior Fellows Program, which, as we say, it's an in-house fellowship for a very limited number of people who come here and work for 1 year. The OAC core course is the distance learning program that takes a whole, a dozen to 2 dozen students every year. And for that, it's a distance learning program. You need, a telephone. It's basically an internet connection where we can have video streaming, and possibly with a phone as a backup if the video isn't working. So That's basically the requirement and the cost to you. There's no tuition. If you're admitted to the course, it's a free program for the students who are admitted, with the possible exception of phone charges should that arise.
Good. So let's go to the next question.
Yeah, so the question is, what are some examples of courses at the OAC? And I'll focus on the core course again, because that's what new applicants would be admitted into. I've said a little bit about it already, but I'll just briefly reiterate. So again, the focus for the OAC core course is on preparing, getting a sense of what kinds of activities go into an intellectual career. So if you're somebody who's thinking about a career, whether in academia or in the policy world in a think tank, and you want to have a sense of would you actually enjoy the work that you do, then the OAC core course might be a good fit for you, because part of the goal is to give people a sense of what's involved. So you'll do writing. So there's basically three components of it: writing, oral communication, and a philosophy track. And in the writing and oral communication components, there's instruction on, principles and methods of writing, applying philosophical ideas, particularly objectivism, to topics in the culture. And so there's an emphasis on writing for a general audience, and there's homework assignments, and you'll write articles and get feedback on them in class. So that's an example of what we do in the writing component. In the oral communication, you'll give practice talks and get feedback on your talks. In the philosophy track, it can, we revisit the curriculum every year and we vary things. So the philosophy component can vary. We do different things. Last year, we did a program where there was a focus on contrasting Aristotle and Ayn Rand on a number of different topics, metaphysics and ethics, and so on. And the year before that, there was a general discussion of some other philosophers. They were looking at Mill and Hume, I believe, in contrast to Ayn Rand on certain ideas. So on the philosophy side, the main focus is on learning how to think philosophically. I should say the OAC does presuppose a fairly advanced level of knowledge about objectivism. So for instance, we require that students applying to the program would already be familiar with, obviously Ayn Rand's two major novels, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, but also some of her nonfiction writings, the books Capitalism, The Unknown Ideal, and The Virtue of Selfishness. And also, we assume that people applying to this program would already be familiar with Dr. Peikoff's book, Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand. And if you haven't already read it, for people who apply, we recommend that you read that, in the course of applying or before you're admitted, if that's relevant.
Good. I'm going to take two quick questions and package them together. So the first one asks about whether, for someone interested in taking part in the Junior Fellows program sometime in the future, the question is, for offices that the person could take the program in, so I assume that means not just here in Irvine. For the first time, we're making it possible for people to take the Junior Fellows program either in Irvine or in our satellite office in Alexandria, Virginia. Whether we will have more satellite offices, I don't know. I don't know that the Institute's planning to open other locations. For the time being, those are the two that exist, and those are the two where one could take part in the on-site Junior Fellows program. The second question relates to applicants who are not in the United States. And the essence of the question is, would they be considered? And my answer is, what we're looking for is talent, and talent arises all sorts of places all over the world, and we would consider whoever applies, whatever their situation. Now, obviously, there's a challenge for people who are not already in the United States and have the legal paperwork to take employment. We wouldn't rule out anyone in that position. And in fact, we'd be open to it if the applicant was sufficiently strong and if we thought it was the kind of applicant we really want in the program. We would do what we can possible for the person. But that's sort of the broadest point here is we're looking for the best and the brightest wherever they may be, and we're open to all sorts of possibilities with that in mind. Why don't you start on this question, and I can add a few things to it. Speaking to the value of education.
Okay, so the question essentially is asking, so on the information about the Junior Fellows Program, there's an indication. How is it put again? It's the minimum requirement is a bachelor's degree, but
we welcome applicants to have more advanced degrees than that.
Yeah. So the question is an advanced degree essential, or what value does it add? In effect, is what the question is asking. Well, I would say for someone, if you're considering an academic career, an advanced degree is you can't have a career in academia without a PhD. Essentially, if you want to be a professor in academia, that's the basic requirement. Whatever field you're going to go into, the professor. I mean, many years ago, it used to be that people could become professors with a master's degree, or sometimes, in some cases, even less academic training. There is a certain, degree inflation that goes on. Basically, today, even with a PhD, it's almost impossible to get a tenure track position in academia. So certainly, as an academic, it's a requirement that you have. And I think even in the policy world, if you want to work in a think tank, if you're interested in working in Washington, it's starting to become the case that it's just expected that people will have more advanced training. So there's a certain way in which it's considered a requirement as a baseline, but there are positive reasons why it can be valuable and why it makes for a better applicant. I think that's what you want to say.
Yeah, I think it's useful to separate out what do you get when you go for advanced training or just even an undergraduate degree. Well, the goal should be to learn something important that you can use in your life and career, and it depends what degree you get. Sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's mixed. I can speak from experience. But the essential thing is that you have to keep your eye on the positive value of education and get as much of it as you can while you're an undergraduate. And if you decide you want to pursue advanced training, the same thing applies. The goal is to learn a body of knowledge and skills that are important for the field. So it's true that and independent of whether you agree with the views you study and the thinkers whose views dominate the field, that's not the primary. The primary is, do you understand those views? Do you understand how they shape academic debates and policy debates? And do you know enough? Have you mastered them to the point where you can refute them? Because if you can't, and if you don't have the knowledge for why they've reached those views and why you think those views are wrong, you aren't going to be as effective. Now, does that mean you must go into academia for advanced training? For some fields, I think it does. But however you gain the knowledge, you need that knowledge. So for many people, it means, well, I'm going to do it through a master's or a PhD. Other people do it themselves, and you can certainly do that. There are a number of people who are self-taught, or they just read widely enough, and they think deeply enough. So however you accomplish it, that goal is still there to be pursued. So independent of what the market conditions are like for people pursuing these jobs, if you're going to do intellectual work, you need a certain level of knowledge and a continuing growing knowledge and a mastery of the field. And it's hard to get that. Many people find that you can definitely gain that faster in many cases through advanced training. Now, in our write-up about the Junior Fellows Program in particular, we want the best people we can find, and sometimes that means they've come from another field and they're transferring to policy work. Sometimes they're in the middle of a graduate program. Those are some of the factors behind why we put the language the way minimum of bachelor's degree, because I think that often means something. And then we encourage people with more advanced degrees. And part of that is to attract people wherever they are in their careers. But the other part is, which is sad to say, we get applicants who think they know more than they do, and often they don't. They really don't know as much as they think they do. And this is a way to help us filter out people and to get a sense for how serious they are. Now, we wouldn't and certainly do not discount people who don't have advanced training. So, as I said in response to an earlier question, we want the most ambitious, intelligent, and hardworking, productive people we can find to do this kind of work and who are open to learning and growing. Sometimes that means they have advanced degrees, sometimes it doesn't. So with that in mind, I would underscore the positive idea here, which is education is valuable. If you can figure out how to learn the things that are important to your career goals, you should do that. How to do that, there are lots of options. It comes down to your individual context. What opportunities you think it might open for you, which opportunities it forecloses, because it's certainly a time cost and money cost for all these things. All right, so I think that addresses the crux of that question.
Mm-hmm. We have a few on the, yeah, why don't you take up a few on the percentage of time? Okay, June, let's take up some of these.
Yeah, so one question is, for the people in the Junior Fellow Program, they have different kinds of responsibilities. They assist with research, they spend time developing their skills, they do some writing. Of those various things, how does their time allocated to all of those? The goal is for it to be about 50-50 in the sense that they spend 50% of their time on actual research projects and tasks we need to get done for various projects here at the Institute, including things like researching a topic, fact-checking an article. There could be things involved in generating content, outlining, say, a video, or all manner of things that are needed on a certain deadline that has to be done, and it's part of their responsibility as editorial and research assistants. So about 50% doing that kind of work, and also writing and doing some amount of editing. Now the other portion of it is skill development, and that happens in two ways. One, as I mentioned earlier, we have workshops and we do individualized training on important skills. So that's a small portion of the time, because the rest of the skill development happens on the work that they're assigned to do. So when someone writes an article or a blog post draft, the editing they get isn't just, here are the edits you need to get this ready to be published. It's more like, here's why you have to do it. Here's editorial feedback that will help you grow. So the feedback that comes on the projects throughout the day, throughout the week, is directed and calculated to help them grow. Now, the other part of this, which is important to stress and that helps integrate the two halves that I've described, is one of the major parts of the junior fellowships is the white paper project, which is a long-range research assignment that the person helps to generate and carries out on their own, with editorial input and feedback throughout on the different stages. And it's supposed to culminate in a white paper document, or like an article, and documenting their research and explaining an issue or arguing for a certain position, which is the sort of work that we do here, and it's good training. That is both a work component, so they're involved in generating a research resource that's valuable, and throughout the process they're getting editorial feedback and feedback on how to think about certain issues from people with experience in doing that. So the separation of how their time is allocated, I think we can run the numbers and it should end up being 50-50, but that's an average over a long period of time. And the final point I would make is, so in other words, it's blended throughout the week and throughout the day. But the other part of this, which is important, is it's intended to be blurred in that way, in the sense that we want to see how well people manage long-range projects and short-range projects, and how they meet deadlines, and whether they can figure out how to keep a long-range project the demands of a day-to-day important skill that you need. It's 50-50. It doesn't feel like that minute to minute, and it's supposed to be a bit hard to figure out how to allocate time. But that's an important way in which we help people see, well, is this the kind of work I want to do? Can I handle this kind of pressure? Can I handle the challenge of juggling these different responsibilities?
So we didn't actually get this as a question, but I think it's worth taking up the question of how much time do students typically spend in a given week on the OAC core course. So the OAC core course, again, it's this 3-track program: writing, oral communication, philosophy. And now we tweak the curriculum and the program every year, so I can't say, definitively this is what it's going to be this coming year, but typically the program starts in late October and it ends sometime in April. And over the course of that academic year, there's a mixture of the different tracks. So there might be writing one week and speaking the next week, but typically at least, or there'll be at most 2 live classes per week, and either a philosophy class or a writing class or a communication class, 2 of those each week. And the classes typically go 2 or 3 hours with a break. So in class time, maximum of 4 to 6 hours per week, 2 classes, 2 to 3 hours each class. And then on top of that, for homework and readings and so on, what students tell us, now obviously it's very individual, it depends on how fast you read and how fast you write and so on, but typically students tend to spend around 8 to 10 hours a week on that. So that's basically the time commitment that goes along with the OAC core course.
So did you want to get to this one? Because the last question I thought would be good to end on is this.
Okay.
And then we can see if they're any live.
Yeah, there's a question. So how exactly what the question is asking? It's worded as, how did you use the writings and ideas of Ayn Rand's to form a curriculum for the Objectivist Academic Center? So one way you can think of it is that the OAC is a little bit like doing a master's degree or having a concentration on Ayn Rand in the same way that you could have an academic concentration, as a senior undergraduate or in a master's program, where you could do a focus on a particular philosopher, like you're going to be an expert on Plato or something like that, or early modern, So it's like the equivalent of a master's degree in objectivism, if that were something that were offered in academia. It's not something that exists in academia. So we try to offer that here. So insofar as you're studying Ayn Rand's ideas, they form a curriculum in the sense that it's a body of knowledge to study. But beyond that, to form the curriculum, we have you go about this the way you go about solving any problem. You figure out what the problem is that you want to solve, and then you apply your knowledge to it. So our goal, as we've said, our goal with the Objectivist Academic Center is to to give people some guidance and training who are interested in academic careers. So in order to do that, they need to have a certain body of knowledge, and they have to have certain skills. And Ayn Rand's ideas are helpful in all of those areas. I mean, Ayn Rand herself gave a course on writing. And nonfiction.
All right, so let me offer an answer to this one question. If you want, you can add to it. So the question is, what criteria do you look for in the ideal OAC student or JFP candidate? I'll answer about junior fellow program applicants, and I've touched on this in the answers to previous questions already. It's worth just putting them all in one. Basically, we want people with ambition, though, as you put it, people who wake up with the burning passion to do this kind of work. And we recognize not everyone knows if this is what they want to do, and this is an opportunity to try it and experiment, but that they should be already really passionate about it. So that's the first one, is ambition and passion, drive. Now the second one I would say is You need to be open to learning, and learning means making mistakes and failing, and being open to failure and recognizing that that's a means of growing and learning. I know in my career, and particularly my time here, I've made a lot of mistakes, and fortunately through editing and just talking to colleagues, I've learned from that, and I know that that's a big part of what learning involves. And we push people and we test what you know and not what you don't know, and that you realize is value in learning more. To put that less cryptically, coming in, if you think you already know an enormous amount, I don't know how open you are to gaining more knowledge. If you're open to the idea that there are lots of things you want to learn and things you need to grow, skills you need to improve, that's really appealing. That's the sort of attitude and mindset that one needs, because in this kind of work, there's never a point of stasis, never a point that you've learned enough. There's no such thing. It's a constantly, it's a field that requires constant intellectual growth. And what we look for in people is, do they have that kind of attitude that it's necessary? Because you can't put that into someone. You can't. It's not like a skill you can train someone in. So I would say they need to have the ambition and serious interest in Ayn Rand's ideas, and really open to learning and growing.
Yeah, I think all of that applies to the core course applicants as well. There's a way in which if you're somebody who's been aware of this program for a number of years and considering applying for a number of years, there's a way in which just in the last couple of years, the core course has sort of narrowed in terms of the people that we're looking for and who are a good fit for the program. It used to be that we would admit people with a much broader range of backgrounds and career plans and interests. Now we're limiting the numbers of people that we admit, and there is a real focus on people who are very seriously considering an intellectual career. So we got a question in the chat earlier about, I've applied a couple of times, what can I do to increase my, chances of getting admitted? It might be, we have an idea of is a good fit for the program, and it might be that if you have a certain career path that you're interested in, a certain academic background and so on, it might not be that there is anything you can do. It might just be that the program isn't a great fit for you, and you could look for other programs that ARI offers, our ARI campus program. So we have a whole set of online courses with instruction on all kinds of different aspects of Ayn Rand's writings and ideas. It might be that viewing those courses is the best fit for your particular situation. So the ideal candidate is someone who's really I mean, I don't repeat everything that you said, but it's a bright, ambitious person who wants to learn, develop, and who's very serious about considering an intellectual career.
I'm just going to glance to see what sort of questions we've received so far in the chat and see if we can accommodate any of those. Just bear with me. We've addressed that one. I don't think we've addressed that one. Yeah, I'll address this one question, and then I think I'd like to wrap up. So So the gist of the question is the applicant, or not the applicant yet, but the person is asking, I have a bachelor's degree and a JD or a law degree. Does that help or hurt my chances? And it's not going to hurt your chances. And in fact, one of the things that's distinctive about this year is we're strongly encouraging people with a background in law, particularly if they've finished law school, to apply, because we're eager to have people here, if we can find the right candidates, who have expertise in law, because that's an area that we think needs to grow here at the Institute. Steve Simpson, who joined the Institute recently, is the Director of Legal Studies, and one of the things we want to do is develop that area for the Institute, and obviously the Junior Fellows Program is not a guarantee that if you complete it, you'll have a job here, but it's the best way to put yourself in a position to apply and be well considered. So we're really interested in people with a law background. There's a lot of work we want to do in the law during the fellowship program and conceivably afterwards. So I would say it's far from it hurting you. It could be a positive advantage for you and others similarly qualified. We've actually had a lot of law school graduates apply, and they've been some of the strongest candidates. So I would encourage you, depending on your interests and so forth, I don't really know what those are, but I'd encourage you to consider applying strongly. So with that, I think it's time to wrap up. I appreciate your joining us on this Google Hangout. My final thought is the deadline is coming up, and definitely if what we've said has helped you clarify your goals and whether this is a fit for you, meaning whether the Junior Fellows Program is a fit, or more broadly, the Objectivist Academic Center here at the Institute will help you advance in your career goals. We encourage you to apply. There's information on how to do that on our website, and best of luck on that.
And I'll just say, if you have a question that didn't get answered here, or you weren't able to get it into the chat, definitely send it in, and somebody will get back to you.
Well, thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Thanks.